Hello and welcome. My name is Paulina Staszkiewicz and I'm a MA student at the Faculty of Conservation and Restoration of Works of Art in Warsaw. Firstly, I would like to thank the conference committee for giving me the opportunity to present today. My presentation concerns digital art, the challenges and preservation strategies. It is based on my semestral work carried out in the Intercathedral Studio Novum for the protection and conservation of modern and contemporary art, run by the supervisor Iwona Szmelter, PhD full professor, for which I interviewed virtual reality artists in order to establish strategy accompanying the acquisition of the VR experience. The topic of the work was inspired by a visit to the Art Museum in Łódź, where at the temporary exhibition I saw Victor Timofeyev's abecedary clock, a digital work which software consisted of encrypting the Latin alphabet into an animated cipher and translating a selected word into encrypted. There was a reset every few minutes and another iteration was created, always slightly different, thanks to the various possibilities of encrypting of the letters. I began to wonder about the essence of this work, which led to the search and interest in the subject of digital art protection. How one should preserve a digital work of art? Does its virtual body even need conservation treatment? Virtual art, digital culture, network art, new media art. These terms cover works of art that can be mostly characterized as allographic, meaning they can exist in many iterations. They are not limited by their material body. Digital art might be also a part of the process art. For example, one of the pioneering works of art in the form of an interactive website, Muszet.org from 1996, still exists today, evolving and entering into a dialogue with the viewer. Digital art is incredibly diverse. Here you can see some examples. A previously mentioned website. Another kind is algorithmic art, which can be represented by Peter Struycken works. Also, digital art, you might be familiar with a collage of 5,000 digital works by people made and sold at Christie's this year for $69 million. Or a virtual reality experience. Here you can see the work Love Story made by 3 talented Polish artists. Digital works of art can mostly be characterized as allographic. They might exist in virtual space in many copies and are more easily accessible to the recipient by collecting them in virtual museums and databases. At first glance, they seem to be easier to preserve for future generations. They lack material bodies that would be exposed to standard factors that damage the autographic body of the work, such as incorrect maintenance, mechanical damage, but environmental factors. However, this impression is misleading because the danger that affects digital works of art is technological acceleration, causing rapid obsolescence of media, incompatibility of hardware, software, and peripheral devices. So, how one should preserve a digital work of art? Well, there are 5 main strategies: storage, migration, emulation, reinterpretation, and documentation. Storing original hardware and software. It is possible to replace a damaged item only if it's in stock. It is about gathering as many devices of a given technology as possible in order to guarantee their possession in the event of damage or replacement due to wear. The strategy is effective only in the short term, not in the long term, as the aging rate of the technology increases very quickly. And it's dangerously easy to turn a museum into an archive and clutter it up unnecessarily. Migration. It consists in upgrading the format of a work from an old media to an up-to-date one. For example, from the VHS video format to DVD. The DVD, for example, uses MPEG-2 codec, which is a codification format with loss of information. In order to guarantee the minimum degradation of a video, lossless conservation formats should be used, rather than the ones used for distribution. The degeneration or loss of quality increases exponentially with the migration generation. So a migration of third or fourth generation doesn't probably satisfy the minimum quality required by the artists. Emulation, programming the simulated operation of a specific software or hardware platform by another newer system or on a different type of hardware. And here you can see a great example, the exhibition Sync Double, Emulation in Theory and Practice. It was held in the Guggenheim Museum, and it tested the promise of an experimental treatment, emulation, for rescuing new media art from the ravages of time. Sync Double features a series of original art installations paired with their emulated versions. It offered unique opportunity for both art experts and the public to compare both versions directly and decide for themselves whether the recreations capture the spirit on the original. And here you can see the same work of art, color panel. On the right, there's original one from 1999. It uses altered Apple PowerBook 280C laptop. And on the left, you see one from 2004 from the exhibition. And it uses altered Apple PowerBook G3 laptop, so newer generation. And you can decide yourself whether it captures the spirit of the original. Reinterpretation. Recreating the work by rewriting the code for a completely different platform according to a group of specific instructions in situ, respecting the objects. It is the most powerful protection strategy, but at the same time it is more risky. It involves the reinterpretation of the work each time it is played. It might require writing code for a completely different platform, in accordance with a group of specific instructions for installing or renewing a work in contemporary media with a metaphorical value. It is very dangerous without the assurance or consent of the artist, but it might be the only way to guarantee the recreation, installation, or redesign of a work of art. And here you can see an example when it is done with the consent of the artists of previously mentioned Peter Struycken. This is the work SHFT 34 by Peter Struycken. It's a book with an SD card and CD-ROM. The CD contains a computer program programmed by Peter Struycken and Floris van Main. It's a Java program. I'm on the first page now. In 2007, 30 copies of it were re-released. And we have number 7 of the 30 copies. It was originally written in 82. It took until 1999 before it was retrieved from an old employee's computer. In my understanding, the museum didn't commission the rewriting of it, but rather the artist and programmer decided to rewrite it. Bearing in mind that before you could only generate 256 colors. They thought it was important for that work to remain dated and not become something new. The original program was partially lost. In 2007, Peter Struycken was already thinking about how to prevent this from happening in future. So he developed the program for 3 different operating systems, for Windows, Linux, and Mac. This way you spread the chances that there will be a computer that can display the work in the future. Documentation, the last strategy. It is actually the first step in protecting the work before choosing a further strategy, one of 4 previously mentioned. And we need to remember that we need new documentation model adapted to digital works. And also remember about the interview with the artist in order to see its attitude to the strategy of protecting his works. Here you can see a diagram showing the layering of a digital work. We have hardware, operating system, software runtime, art historical layer, and subjective layer. Now that we have some knowledge about digital art and how it works, let's move to the second part of the presentation. On March 18, 2021, an interview was conducted with VR artists Jakub Wróblewski, Przemysław Denowski, and Andrzej Isakow, the creators of Bardo and Love Story. The interview was aimed at establishing the artist's attitude to the strategy of protecting a VR work, accompanying its inclusion to the collection. Usually, when we talk about conservation, we don't think about works of art that have been created in the last few years. However, conservation begins with the decision to acquire or archive the work. At this point, a decision is made as to which version is stored and which work items are included. Since VR works can be composed of complex files, software, HMD, peripherals, and archiving is an expensive and difficult process, certain decisions need to be made. In the interview, we used the layering method of documentation, the one I showed you previously. So we asked about the symbolism, interpretation of the works, about the concept. Next, about the technique. What does the creative process look like? How long does it take to create a VR work? These artists work on a yearly basis. Do they collaborate with programmers? So they are the team of 3 people. One of them is specializes in programming, one in sound effects, and the third one is general art guy. What specialized software and hardware do they use? So first of all, they use Unreal Engine. It's kind of the basis of their activities, and then they use different software to generate necessary elements like scanning software, motion capture software. They use, in general, engine, sound tools to obtain a 3D object, for example, Maya, Blender, 3D Studio, Substance Painter for texturing. They are using motion capture. They also use some peripheral tools of companies that make headsets to make sensors that can be attached. It's like continuous learning because there are always new stuff coming. What is more important for artists, the idea or form of the work? And the answer I got was the form carries the content and the content takes the form. So it's difficult to separate. If we got more specific answer, it could be helpful for the future, while, for example, reinterpretation or emulation. Would they allow a work to exist in several iterations, in different versions? And as they answered, sadly, it often happens so, because they create something for 6 spaces of freedom, and some festivals ask for a 3D version that is simply easier for them to play, and then we lose this entire interactive layer. However, if they want their art to be seen, they need to adapt. Okay, how about the relationship between artist intention, VR technology? Is preserving the work in its current form, including the Googles from 2021, important to them? And it actually turns out it is. The original Googles, they would like to store them with the work of art to show the original context. And would they be willing to extend the work in the future if we could feel senses such as smell or touch? And these kind of tools exist today. These are haptic suits, but they would rather not come back in the future and change the work of art. They would rather keep it as it is. I also asked about future conservation activities, how a conservator curator be useful now, and what should they pay attention to when working with a new media artist. And the answers were learn code, learn programming, propose such concept that the artists would leave their digital works in some safe space for conservators, with sources, with a project. It turns out the conservator in the future will be a programmer, because you need to know the the media that artist is using in order to help it be conserved. We asked about the acquisition of work, to propose the acquisition, especially for a museum collection. And they answered that the backup of this project in at least 2 different places is very important. Also, hardware backup, the headset, the tools that are used today, the display devices. Maybe in the future they will look completely different, but they would like one from this year to show it in original context. To sum up the documentation of the works of Bardo and Love Story, we now have a video of the interview transcription. We recognized the topic of digital art, got to know the artist's attitude to the strategy of preserving the work when it's included in the collection. And I think we also directed the artist's attention to strategic thinking at the beginning and during the creation of the work, the selection of supported engines, environments, equipments. In conclusion, there are 5 main strategies for preservation of digital art: storage, migration, emulation, reinterpretation, and documentation. Plus 6. We need cooperation with artists. Thank you very much for your attention. Here you can see the sources that I've used. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.